Hi everyone, hope you're all enjoying the module this week. We are talking about photography, which since your visual media surveys, we've realized that photos and images are really the main medium of how we understand the world. We've been talking about text and how the invention of the alphabet has made us logical and rational people. And now we're going to talk in this week about maybe how the dominance of images in our society is returning us to almost a more emotional tribal experience with visual communication. So I'm going to do a little review before I go into how photos communicate, a review from what you should have already read this week. You've read this New York Times article, which even though it was written a few years ago, I think is so relevant still. You all still use Snapchat. I read it all in your visual media surveys. So what this article was really saying is how cameras are now as important as the keyboard as a way for us to communicate. And what it says is that we are moving away from only using this text in the alphabet, and we are now communicating using images. You likely send images and GIFs and reactions, or maybe just a photo of your day, and you just send that with no text attached often. And so what are these images communicating? And what are images that are being sent to you communicating to you? So using this article really as a bridge from our text conversations and understanding the impact of text, and now what is the impact of photography and of images, this ability to capture the appearance of a moment and make it permanent. It's almost as crazy as the first time that somebody wrote on a cave paint on a cave wall and made an idea that was in their head at least semi-permanent, representing it in a way outside of their mind. And now we have this ability to represent the way that something looked. But what this article was talking about is really interesting. It's about how we can talk with pictures, and you do this all the time. We do this with memojis, we do it with regular or bitmojis, we do it with emojis, reaction GIFs, all of this. And the fact that some people say maybe we're regressing or we're going backwards. I mean, I see it as we're going forwards because we're using images in a different way. We're using photos not just to document, as it was for so much of its history, as it talked about in that in the 5-minute history of photography video from the introductions page, but we're also trying to find ways to add emotion back into our text communication, because the computer made text in the beginning. It made text still the dominant language, visual language, the dominant way we communicated through AOL Instant Messenger, where there were no images that you were able to send to other people. So it's interesting that we are now in a place with social media and with modern visual communication that we can communicate using images. And now these images, especially on Snapchat or on Instagram stories, they disappear in 24 hours. So it's almost this return to the orality of language, when we used to speak something and then it disappeared. It never happened again. So images are now becoming replaceable, and the meaning isn't fixed, which is very, very different than the way that photos were used in the early days, just to document and to show what something looked like. Now we're using not just what does it look like, but we are communicating messages, using it to communicate messages beyond possibly its original, the messages embedded in the original moment, because we're not in every moment. We're just sharing these images and because meaning is not fixed, which we know from semiotics, we can determine or talk about how these images are being used for meanings that are very different than maybe what the original intention is. So this idea from Berger, so now we're moving into the Berger reading that you had to do this week, just to connect all this for you before we get into some of the actual visual language that you'll have to use for your paper this week, your assignment. This is from the Berger reading, that he talks about how we document with pictures, that they don't just show life, sometimes they have been presented as life, and that the camera is just this fixed, it fixes an appearance of something, but it can't fix the meaning. So this visual information, this visual data that you receive is actually severed from the lived experience that created it. And this is a limitation, but in today's society, you are all using it actually as an asset, that there isn't meaning attached to this image, and therefore I don't know where it came from or what it felt like to be there, but I can use it in a different example. or sorry, I can use it to communicate a different message. So photos can travel now, especially with visual media, with our visual media environment, images can travel, and with them, new meaning. So what Berger was talking about is how photos can be personal. So he's talking about different uses of photography. You'll have to consider these and identify these also in your assignment. He says photos can be personal. These are just some of my personal photos from the last few weeks. I helped my friend build some shelves. I was grading you all. I cooked some dinner, went to a lake, right? So they can be personal or they can be public images. These are sports photos from the Eldon, where I'm the advisor, images from the government, where they actually these images are created to be public images, right? The idea is that you take this photo in order to share it. What happens then when the meaning is not preserved? Lots of iconic photos, sports photos. Didn't mean to put 2 sports photos on there, but you understand, lots of public images that exist out there. You see them every day. And so thinking about what Berger said about how memory was really what took the place of the photograph before the photograph. We could draw things, we could paint them, but really this replaces our own memories. Photos can create memories of experiences that we've never had before, or they can create memories and remind us of experiences we have had before if they're personal photographs. So think about these different uses of photography that Berger's talking about. If it's a personal photograph and how that impacts your memory of that moment, or if it's a public photograph, meaning not yours, how does that impact your memory of a moment? What meanings are you attaching to it? Because they don't only capture the appearance of reality, but not the reality itself. But because our little pea brains can't figure out the difference between an image, a photograph, and real life because of mirror neurons and everything we read about in the first few weeks of class, you understand that images are hardwired to our emotional receptors, and we think that we've experienced it. So we file that memory away in the same place in our brain. So this is, again, the little history of photography. Please watch that video. This video is in the intro page to this module. But just understanding how the uses of photography have changed over the years, and just how important this Kodak camera, the snapshot, was. The idea that you could have a personal photograph that you took and that was your perspective, because something else Berger talks about that you will have to discuss here this week is the importance of the photographer, because like Berger says, the camera is replacing the eye of a single person, and any sort of photo that you see, a public photo, so it's not one that you took, is basically the view of a stranger. It's somebody who says, hey, look at this, look what I saw. So you have the photographer's brain, the camera itself, the quality of the camera, the lens, how's the person standing, how did they get to that moment where they were able to capture it. So really thinking about the importance of the photographer and how readily available this ability to capture reality, the appearance of reality, how quick, or how just how much people can do this, how easy it is for you to be a photographer, that we are not just consumers of images and photos, but we are creators of images. And so the way the photographer, this is what you will have to cite in your assignment this week, is this language of photography. So how the photographer actually captured this moment. What does it look like? Because these things they do communicate messages. So if you weren't there and you don't have that memory, let's say of this famous Muhammad Ali fight, I wasn't there, you weren't there, but these are the things that we are looking at. These are also typed up and printed down below, as well as this PowerPoint. I'll leave that for you in this module page. But I want you to think about these 5 elements. These are basically techniques that photographers can use, either consciously or unconsciously. If you're a professional photographer, you know these things, you embed them in yourself. But even if you're not a professional photographer, you're taking a photo of your cat to send to your friend or something, or a photo of your meal, you're still paying attention to a lot of these things, whether you know it or not. You think about the angle, the vantage point, the direction that you're shooting, and I'll give you some examples of how this photo could have turned out differently, because you can see that there's different photographers on the backs on the other side between Muhammad Ali's legs here. What are the different angles of this exact same moment? Why is this the one that gets remembered and gets shared versus others? So thinking about the angle, is it a low angle? Is it a high angle? Is it a wide angle? Is it a close crop? And thinking of those techniques and how that impacts, it communicates something to you almost before you have a chance to perceive. Same thing with the framing. Think about what's in the frame and think about what's outside the frame, because it's a conscious decision to choose to photograph one thing and to exclude all other things. When you want to show you're living your best life at the beach, you take a photo maybe of just your feet and the water, and you don't take a photo of the hundreds of other families that are around you, right? You want to look like you're alone on this private beach. So Instagram is a lot about framing that Instagram life. Maybe you watch people, or you look at accounts on Instagram that appear as if reality is perfect, but consider the framing. What aren't you seeing? Maybe the team of people who have made that image happen. That's definitely for the entertainment industry. Framing is everything. You don't see the director in the movies that you watch. You only see the actors. Lighting can impact your mood as well. Is there high contrast? Is it a dark photo? Is it a light photo? So go back to depth a little bit with this. Focus, what's in focus, what's not in focus. You've seen some photos, like even portrait mode, maybe if you have an iPhone, where it blurs the background and brings the front into focus. That impacts you as well, tells you what you should be paying attention to, tells you what to select. And then composition. How are the elements in the photo arranged? Is it using rule of thirds? This is a really pretty straightforward image, but look at the composition where you have basically a straight up line. Sorry, it's this way, and then you have one line on the bottom. You have this T kind of perpendicular in the middle. It's very centered. If you look at other photos, like let's look at this, historic, iconic photographs of really historic events. What is the composition of this image? What is all of this empty space over here? And how is that powerful? How does that impact you, right? It allows for this smoke to carry out. What if this image was cropped like right here? Just this part, would the composition have been as powerful? So thinking of again, in this photo, the angle, where did this photograph come from? How did this photographer get this shot? Where were they standing? What's the lighting? What's the angle? What's the framing? What's in the frame? What's out of the frame? What is on focus? And especially the composition. So that's why rule of thirds, maybe you've heard of that. Where are things in the frame and how does it impact your perception of it? Same with this very iconic photo from a few days later. The framing on this, the who's in the image, right? The angle, the composition. You have 3 people and then an angular line. So going back a little bit to visual cues when you're analyzing this language of photography, because it is impactful before you even attach a perception to it. So as an example, these are a couple of other photos from this same fight that have not been remembered in the same way and that have different emotional impacts. So photographs, again, are very emotional. How are they communicating these emotional messages? Who's in the frame? Who's not in the frame? If I go back, let me go back to this one. So who's not in the frame that's in the frame now? Does that make a difference that the referee is not in the frame? Framing, lighting, look at the lighting on this, where the lighting is kind of reflecting off of all of their skin because they have been exercising and they're glistening. You don't really get as much of that. Also, focus. This is not as in focus of a photo. This is a very in focus photo. This is a little bit more blurry. And this one is in black and white. So almost again of the same similar angle, different colors, different framing. You can see this guy is no longer in between the legs. Let me go back. So slightly different angle, but yet it makes a difference. What is the difference between this image, this photo, and this photo? These are stylistic decisions that each photographer had to make. And now it's captured this appearance of the moment. So there's so many different ways to show the way a moment looked. And so I want you this week to be thinking about the way that photos communicate, the language of photography, in this case, these 5 techniques and these 5 elements. So what you're doing is considering, is it a personal or a public photograph? And according to Berger, what does that mean? And then you're considering, what is it documenting and what is it communicating? This is based off of the New York Times article and the Snapchat article. And then you're going to analyze, how does it communicate those messages? How did it get documented? And how does it communicate? And what does it communicate through these different uses of photography? So a lot of things to think about in this week, but I know you can do it. This is a medium that you use every single day of your lives. And so I hope you enjoy and have some fun analyzing an image of your choosing. Please pick any one. It could be a personal or a public photo. I'm really excited to see what you all choose. So enjoy.